I almost bailed. And I just said, I can't do it anymore. I'm over it. I don't want to anymore. That thing.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for yet another podcast episode. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the 20th episode. So yay! Is that a milestone? Yay, yes. If you are new here, I am Nora, like I said, and I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut. And I have been knitting for a year now, which is very fun to say. This is our sidekick, Osie. She likes to make an appearance on the channel from time to time, and most of the time it's usually just by barking. So this is Osie. We have been doing these podcasts for a few months now. Like I said, I guess this is the 20th episode, which is kind of crazy. Along with my sidekick, Miss Osie, I am here just to share my journey in knitting and all of the things that I'm learning along the way, as well as utilize the incredible audience that we have here to help me become a better knitter and a better crafter, and hopefully we can really help each other. So that's what we're doing here. My number one philosophy that I will always continue to urge you to share with me is that the imperfections are what make something so perfectly handmade. And so if you feel like you could hop on board with that same idea, then I urge you to come hang out with us more often. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive on in. I've got some exciting news for you. We have finished objects. We have new cast-ons. Things are happening. So let me go ahead and start out by saying that the Core 7 cardigan that I was hoping to have started the double knit button band on by today is currently blocking. So that is still being put off just a little bit, but I think that works out with the timeline of the other things. So still glossing right past the Core 7 cardigan, but it has not been forgotten. Hopefully by next week, we will have some updates on that. And so the next project that I'd like to talk to you about is my Muscle Brewer hat by Isolde Teague, which was on my needles for a total of 49 days. That's right, I said was, because that baby has been bound off. Here we have it. Actually, here we have it. There we go. This is the Muscle Brewer hat, like I said, by Isolde Teague. I knit this up using Hedgehog Fibers Skinny Singles in the colorway Orca. It's a single ply yarn, and I mentioned last week that it was getting this sort of fuzz to it. And so many of you reached out and said, that's totally typical for a single ply yarn. And I don't know why I didn't think of that beforehand. Of course that is. I'm not shocked by that. I just wanted to note because from the time I started working on the project through the end of it, it definitely got a lot more fuzzy. Again, totally to be expected. No big deal. It was just something that I wanted to note. But overall, the yarn itself, absolutely adore the colorway of this. The variegation in it is so even. It's so balanced. It's really well done, and I'm not surprised as this is Hedgehog Fibers. I believe that this single skein of yarn cost me about $30, and I know that I bought it on sale at Stars Hollow Yarns. Yeah, this hat is done. So obviously it doesn't look much like a hat right now. It is indeed, it still needs to be folded together. I have not yet blocked this. So let me go ahead and fold it into itself so that you could see. So basically we've got this tube of a hat. Remember this whole time I was saying it's a pill shape and then one side tucks into the other. And so what I found to be the easiest is kind of grab about the halfway point and just sort of shimmy them into each other like that. no big deal. So one side you start with your cast on, and then you increase, you knit that stockinette tube for just miles, and then you go ahead and decrease on the other end. And the reason I wanted to knit this pattern in the first place, and one more time, thank you to Sally Ann for gifting this pattern to me. I am so happy that I got a chance to try this out. One of the reasons I really wanted to knit this pattern is because of the claim that this is your perfect fingering weight, one full skein project. And I really do have a few one skein wonders in my stash that I'd love to just quickly turn into a hat on a side project. Oh, not quickly. This isn't a quick project, and that's okay. So I don't mean quickly, but just have something easy breezy, turn it into a hat, guaranteed, it'll get worn somewhere. But I have not yet blocked this, and I intentionally waited because I wanted to show it here before it's blocked. We'll have to see how it is after. Oh, and I wore my hair up today. At the moment this is for my boyfriend, and at the moment on his head, it is at a very awkward length where to wear it as a skull cap, as in not folding it up at all, it has too much slouch in the crown, but then folding it up, you really get this kind of awkward amount of fold, and then it no longer is covering his ears. So it sort of defeats the whole purpose of this hat, which is that you're supposed to fold it up and have this quadruple layer of fabric keeping your ears nice and toasty. I do feel like once I've blocked this, it should be perfect. So this is really just me noting that at the moment, this is not the perfect fit, but I do think after I block it, it should be. That being said, too, I will measure from crown to crown. I'll go ahead and I'll measure from one end of the pill capsule to the other, as well as from the end of the increases to the beginning of the decreases, and leave that measurement on the screen here so that you can reference it. And I did use my full skein of yarn, which leads me into my notes on the pattern. My shoulder's tired from holding that up. So let's go ahead and talk about the decreases. So I really enjoyed the stockinette portion of the hat. And if you have a recommendation for a smaller accessory project, a hat, a scarf, anything really that's not a pair of socks, just socks aren't for me right now. But if you have a recommendation of just sort of like miles of stockinette in the round, I'd love to hear what it is. That's not a sweater, but an accessory. Because my intention with having this hat on the needles was to have a go-to for my just grab and go knitting. And for me, that looks a lot like, hey, I've got 5 minutes with my coffee to just get in a few stitches. Oh, perfect. I'll work on the muscle burra. Or if I'm, say, watching a TV show and I just want something to do with my hands, I could do that stockinette in the round without looking. And what's particularly nice about this pattern is that I have the reassurance of I really don't have to refer back to the pattern or double check or start measuring for quite a while before I get to the point of decreasing again. So I really liked it for that. Since we spoke last, though, I did start the decreases and I went through that part of the pattern and just binding off this project. Obviously, as you're decreasing, your circumference is getting smaller and smaller, and so you're no longer able to knit in the round at some point. I'm not a fan of magic loop. However, I have no problem doing it for a limited period of time. So for something like this where I knew, I just have to finish getting through these crown decreases and then I'm done with the magic loop, that's fine with me. I just don't want to do an entire project in magic loop. So I shifted to that method. Now, at this point, I realized that I did not have a 3mm needle in an interchangeable set, or to use with my interchangeable set, or on a long enough cord. I thought I had one, but I in fact have two 3.5mm needles for my interchangeable set. And I was knitting this originally on a 16-inch circular with a 3mm needle, of course, attached to it, as it was a fixed circular. So when I switched to Magic Loop, I wasn't going out and buying a new needle that day. It was getting done that night. So I had the option to either drop down to a 2.5 millimeter needle or go up to a 3.5 millimeter needle. I decided to go ahead and just drop down because I figured, because that's what I was going to do. My thought process was that if this was going to be the half to be tucked inside of the hat, it really didn't need to be perfect. It didn't need to be pretty. It just has to get done. And by the time I got down to the Magic Loop, it was pretty insignificant, the amount of rounds that I had left to do. So I dropped down to the 2.5 millimeter needle on a longer cord. I was knitting Magic Loop. The 2.5 millimeter needle that I was using was my least favorite needle that I own, which are the carbons. And I don't like them because they have the carbon fiber shaft of the needle and then the metal tip. And I don't find that that's a particularly seamless connection. So combining Magic Loop with that little issue in the needle, and then just for an even less ideal circumstance, I grabbed one of the cables from my brand new set of interchangeable needles. And the one thing with the Knit Picks and the Knitter's Pride needles is that those cables are horrible, but it's never bothered me because I've never had to knit Magic Loop with them, really. However, on this day, with this small circumference, with this non-seamless transition from the metal tip of my needle to the shaft, with my crazy cord that was trying to strangle me and suck me inside of this hat, I almost bailed. I wanted to be done. I hated that experience. I also feel that the instructions and the decreases are very straightforward and plain. However, the way that they're organized on the page left me a little bit confused. And essentially, it built the way that the paragraph was constructed, it would tell you how many decreases or how to decrease. And then without a space between that line and the next line, it then said how many rounds to just knit plain. And then there was another paragraph that sort of had that same formatting. And then it said repeat the last 2 rounds. And I couldn't compute if it wanted me to repeat the 2 paragraphs or if it just wanted me to repeat the 2 rounds in the last paragraph. Ultimately, I went with that because it said repeat last 2 rounds, and that would have been the last 2 rounds. So if you know better than me, definitely let me know. But essentially, I was just in this mess of stitches getting stuck on that spot in the needle, the cable wrapping around me, not being able to shift these stitches over in the way that I wanted to. And I think I was 2 rounds short of the final decrease round. And I just said, I can't do it anymore. I'm over it. I don't want to anymore. And so I just skipped to the end. I just said, forget about it. We're done. And so I just did the typical, scoop up the stitches with the needle and that thing. Is it attractive? No. Is it fine? It's fine. I also just love to live on the edge. I know everyone said I should just weigh the yarn and then subtract the weight of the needles, and I wasn't doing that. I was feeling lazy. This was my easy project. So I just went ahead and knit down. I started the project without weighing how much yarn I started with, but taking the label for, what it's worth. And so I assumed I had 100 grams in the skein. After I did the initial increases at the very beginning of this knit, I weighed my yarn, subtracted, and discovered that I had used 13 grams for the increases, assuming I was starting with 100 grams of yarn. I knit down until I had about 13 grams left. And I figured if I really needed to, I could just I have a few scraps of fingering weight yarn that I could have just popped in for the very inside of the hat. It would not have bothered me or my boyfriend very much at all. If anything, it would be a reminder, this is the inside. So that didn't bother me, but I will say it was dead on perfection. I had enough yarn that I could have completely done those last 2 rounds of decreases and tied off and still would have had probably a good 10 inches or so. I mean, like, it was yarn chicken, but no, it was fine. I didn't doubt it at any point. However, I did wind up just leaving a good tail inside of the hat. And then I think I cut off like 12 inches of yarn and tossed that. That being said, as it stands right now, the hat finished weighs 108 grams. So I love that it used the full skein of yarn as it was promised. If this blocks out to a point where he can comfortably fold up the hat and cover his ears, then I'll be very thrilled with the project. I love the way that the increases look. I have no problem with that. I followed Nitty Natty's tutorial for the cast on, and I think that looks seamless. My other end leaves a little to be desired, but it was worth it to me to be done. I couldn't do it anymore. I was annoyed. And also, reminder to myself that I need a 3mm needle. I am hoping to grab one of those at some point to add because I really thought that I had one, but I was so wrong. So anyway, I think it looks great. My boyfriend does too. This is the adult medium. And I thought that I had done this on the 8 stitches per inch gauge. However, I followed the 9 stitches per inch gauge, and I'm glad that I did because the actual width of the hat, I mean, it's that perfect fit. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just right. So even with blocking, it's going to be absolutely fine. And I am planning to block it hopefully for length rather than width. And hopefully I'll get a ton of wear out of this. So I will keep you posted. This is going to get blocked tonight. And yeah, I'll keep you posted on that. That's my finished Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. I did actually kind of prioritize that after the last podcast because I put myself on a pause with Dad's sweater. So now let's move into that. So for my dad's birthday, I am knitting him the Learn to Knit a Men's Sweater pattern by Stacey Perry of Very Pink Knits. If you caught my last podcast episode, then you know this has been my just pride and joy to knit on. Oh, by the way, I didn't knit this. This is a store-bought sweater. Sorry, I know someone's going to ask. So this has been just a joyful knit for me. It's a quarter zip sweater that features these wide spans of ribbing across the body. And I have made a few modifications, such as the cuffs and the hem in the original pattern are done with an I-cord bind off. I chose to continue the 2x2 ribbing pattern that you see in the collar. Speaking of the collar, in the pattern, your cast on edge is the raw edge that sits up against the jaw, and I decided to do mine as a folded collar, and I am knitting this for my dad somewhere in between the sizes large and extra large. I pretty much just continued the raglan increasing from the large to get somewhere in between those two sizes. And I am knitting this in Cascade 220 Superwash in the colorway Jet. So this is done. The knitting is done. It's a mess right now because it's kind of just been chucked in a ball in the corner. The knitting is done. Here is our progress keeper from last week. Or did I not even move it? Did I move it last week? Like, that seems obscene. I'm not sure. What I do know is that I have done the 2x2 ribbing on the bottom. I bound off. I also went ahead and did the 2x2 ribbing on the cuffs and bound those off. Let's start by saying that for the bind off of the 2x2 ribbing, thank you so much to all of you for your suggestions. I wound up going ahead and following the tutorial by Andrea Mowry on how to rearrange your stitches for the 2x2 bind off in Italian or tubular bind off. I always love to just demystify these things because we hear them. We've had this before with helical knitting, how that sounds so freaky and what could that possibly be about, and letting you know like it's going to be okay. Same thing for this 2x2 ribbing and rearranging the stitches. That was a terribly frightening term to me. I didn't know what that would entail. And if you're freaking out about it too, just know it's very simple. The Andrea Mowry tutorial is fantastic. It's simple, cut and dry. But essentially all that you're doing is if you have your 2 knits and your 2 purl stitches, as you would with 2x2 ribbing, you're going to go ahead and knit that first knit stitch. And then instead of knitting the second stitch or purling it, you actually are going to sort of pull your knit and your purl off of the needle and flip them around like you would with a cable and pop them back on the needle so that your purl stitch and your knit stitch have swapped places. And so you can continue by knitting your purl, your knit, your purl. It would then be followed by another 2 knit stitches. So you would knit the first and then you repeat that. She does a great job of explaining it in the video and I couldn't recommend that more. I'm happy with the way that it looks. I had some other suggestions for what I could try. And when I was looking at the different options, I loved things on some more than others. However, I came back to the tubular bind off because to me, from the photos and things that I saw with the 2x2 ribbing, it looked the most tidy. I'd be interested to try another way of 2x2 ribbing bind offs. So if you have a favorite way, then definitely let us know. But for me and the research that I had done, I just decided to go ahead and do the regular tubular bind off. So once I had done that round of rearranging the stitches, which by the way, I also just started in the cuff so that it was a more, a little less jaunting. I tend to do that with the tubular or the sewn bind off anyway, just because I feel like it takes me a second to get my groove with it. So it's easier for me to start in such a small circumference. So I went ahead, did a round of rearranging my stitches. Then I did a round of knit 1, slip 1, then a round of slip 1, purl 1, and then went ahead and did the tubular or Italian bind off. Also, my favorite tutorial for an Italian bind off is from Brooklyn Tweed. I have found it to be the most helpful and I have watched it every single time I've done an Italian bind off. The first time I did an Italian bind off, I cried and I thought that it was horrible and I hated it, but I loved the look of it so much. So the next time I did one, I found their video and it's a game changer. So if you struggle with an Italian bind off, then I definitely recommend checking that out and watch the full video first because you'll understand after you've seen it. So I went ahead and did that for my cuffs. And then for the hem, I think it looks good. I definitely think that you can tell that it's my knit stitches in particular that kind of look like they all kind of went like this. I think it's totally fine. I absolutely think that it is fine. I'm curious to see when I block this, how that'll turn out, but I was very satisfied with the results. So now let's talk about the hem for a second because I had a moment of panic. Right as the video went up last Saturday, I was about halfway through my 2x2 ribbing and I was looking at it and the way that the cord was on there, it looked like it was flaring out a little bit. And I stopped and I thought, should I have decreased for the ribbing? I made a conscious choice not to because I didn't actively want the hem of this sweater to cinch in at all. In sweaters that I've knit where it tells you to decrease prior to the ribbing at the hem, I've done it and then since then have kind of tried to avoid it because I always feel like it gives this where I prefer something that's more straight. And so I consciously chose to not decrease, but then I had this moment of second guessing myself. So I actually popped a pinned comment under the last video and said, what do you guys think I should do? And most of you said you should be fine. Keep going. I'm so glad that you did. It gave me the confidence to just trust my gut. And I went ahead and just did the 2x2 knitting without any decreases. And the way that I always will do my hems is I don't bind anything off until all of the standard knitting is done. So I knit my way down the 2x2 ribbing. My intention was to knit about 2.5 inches, as that's going to be the height of the collar. So I wanted that marriage to sort of keep continuity throughout the sweater, as it's not designed originally to have 2x2 ribbing on the hems and finishes. I had to kind of make these game time decisions myself, which is fine. So I went ahead and knit just under 2.5 inches on the hem because I knew I was going to do the setup rows and all of that for the bind off. So then I went ahead and did the same amount of stitches on the cuffs. I think for me it wound up being 17 rows on everything. And then I tried it on. This is for my dad. However, he and I are the same exact height and size and everything. So I can get a good reference of how this is going to fit. And everything was looking just as I had hoped. I went ahead and did all of the measures I had to for the bind off. As it stands now, I don't think that the hem is flaring out at all. I made sure to do my bind off a little bit on the looser side so that when this is blocked, hopefully everything will be good. But I also figure I have not yet done this with any of my garments, but I know people say all the time you could always just pop in a strand of elastic. So I figure if the bottom of the hem is just flaring out slightly, then a strand of elastic should solve the problem. And if not, I have no issue cutting and going back and just redoing things. No big deal. So I am very pleased right now. I'm nervous because of a couple of things. First of all, at the moment, this sweater is fitting perfectly, as in it is not too small, it is not too big, it is just fitting me like a long sleeve t-shirt would. That was my goal because superwash grows like crazy. And so I figure if it's the right size right now, it's probably going to be massive. So I think right now I'm in a good spot. We'll see if I eat my words after this is blocked, but I do think it's in a good place. And I've been just double checking the swatch to remind myself how much this pattern opens up. It's a fully ribbed sweater. It all has to relax. It's super wash. I might even do a little vertical hanging once it's almost done drying. If I need a little extra length, I could also, like I said, just go back and add a little length. No big deal. I'm not afraid to do those things. But as it stands right now, I'm very happy with how things are going. And it was at this point that I realized, I was like, oh, we're going to have a big blocking day. We're going to block all the things that I need to have blocked. And then it's all going to be ready at the same time. It's going to be fantastic. And then I realized, sure, I could do that, but I don't have anywhere to actually physically block these garments. I have space for one thing at a time, maybe an accessory and a sweater at once. So I think that's the plan for tonight, is to get the sweater and the hat blocked, if not one or the other, and just every day it's going to be blocking. My goal was to just do it all in one shot because I was like, oh, I'll just use the water, but that's okay. So this, at the moment, is in need of a good block. At that point, we're going to find out how the yarn fares. I have had just a little bit of concern with the Cascade 220 as the first 2 balls of it that I used, which, by the way, at this point, I have used exactly 6 balls of the Cascade 220 to finish this sweater for my dad. Like I said, in between the large and extra large. Keep in mind too, he's my height, so he's not like the tallest man alive. So the torso is probably a little bit shorter than some other men's. I think there's like a lot of discrepancy in a men's sweater because of all of those variations. At this point, I have pretty much used exactly 6 balls because this is all I have left. And the issue was that the first 2 balls that I used all had this like very stretchiness to them. Actually, as I'm holding this, the first 2 were very plump and sort of seemed to have this bounce and elasticity to them. Whereas the preceding 4 balls that I used all had this more stretched out. And the best comparison that I could use is like after you've used a hair tie elastic for too long and it gets to that point where like it'll stretch, but it doesn't want to. That's how the rest of these have been. And even here, it just doesn't have that bounce back, which seems consistent with superwash yarn if everyone says that it grows so much and it stretches out like crazy and blocking, it makes sense that it would have this sort of lack of ability to bounce back. But I double checked the labels on all of the yarns. They're all the same. I'm not sure what happened. We'll find out in blocking if it's a disaster, and I'll go from there. However, as it stands, while it felt really strange in my hand and it felt very different from the first 2 balls to the next 4, I haven't seen a difference in the garment. So that's just where things are at. I know a lot of people say that to them superwash yarn has that squeaky feel to that. I didn't really experience that too much until I was doing the sewn bind off. And I'm telling you, there were a couple of times this yarn audibly squeaked as the needle. Oh, it was like nails on a chalkboard. It was kind of horrible. But I didn't experience anything negative about that during the actual knitting process of the garment. So just something to note. It's for a man who's not going to take the time to hand wash this necessarily. I mean, he probably will, but just in case. I want him to know he can wear it. So that's where we're at on Dad's sweater. As I'm looking at it right now, I need to take all of my stitch markers out from when I was counting the decreases, but I just left them in there so that I can do hopefully a better job than I've done in the past of adding notes to the Ravelry page for this project, so that if you are also eyeing this one, because I know a lot of you have said that you want to knit this as well, but also if Dad really likes it, then I want to make sure that I know what I did so he can always have another one in another color, or so I could say, oh, next time I knit this, he said the sleeves were too long, so we could do 1 less decreases, whatever it is. I kept everything in there so that I can go ahead and take better notes. But that is Dad's sweater at the moment. I'm very proud of this, and we will just see how it blocks out. Hopefully by next week, I will have blocked it, and hopefully by then I will have also inserted the sweater, because at that point too, it's going to be Dad's birthday. So that is the Learn to Knit a Men's Sweater by Stacey Perry, which, by the way, has been a whip for 17 days today. However, I did bind it off on that 16th day. But as long as this still needs its zipper and everything, I'm going to say that it's still a whip. So it's been a whip for 17 days. I also made a conscious decision to not really weave in the ends from the bind offs. I went ahead and just sort of tacked them to close the gap between the first and the last stitch of the bind off. However, after it's blocked and I've tried it on again, if I'm confident that it will fit my dad, then I will go ahead and weave those in entirely. And otherwise, I'm going to bring a little repair kit with me when I gift this to my dad, so that I can see if we're good to go there. I can weave in those ends for him, or if I need to undo things, it leaves me a little bit of an easier path to undo stuff. So once I had cast off my dad's sweater, the muscle burra was done and bound off. I I was faced with this great blocking debacle of 2024 where I'd love to be working on the corset cardigan, but it's blocking and needs to be blocked to do the double knit button band. I'd love to wrap up my dad's sweater and pop the zipper in, but that needs to be blocked to work on that. And then my mindless knitting was gone, the muscle burra. So I was left in a little bit of a pickle because I really didn't want to start another garment until the corset is done. And I'm still, I was a little angry at the way that the hat situation ended. So I wasn't totally ready to start a hat yet. I also am thinking that the next thing I knit, garment-wise, is going to be another gift knit. And so I really figured I want something for myself. I do still feel like I need a mindless knitting thing, but I don't know what that's going to be just yet. So I thought I do need something to just knit for myself really quick that I could maybe get done while everything's blocking and I'm getting all of this stuff in order. That's not going to take away from those projects, but rather will keep my interest until those are ready to be worked on again. And so came time. I am checking things off of my winter knitting plans list, and I'm so proud of myself for that. So I was finally able to cast on a pattern that I have been eyeing. It's another one of those ones I have been looking at since I picked up the knitting needles, and that is the Boulevard bag by Lily Kate Makes, so generously gifted by our friend Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, for gifting this pattern to me. So yesterday I sat down and I was in between two different colorways for this bag. Yes, it's a bag. It's a little crossbody bag that is like a crescent shape. And so it's a strap and then just the cute little bag that I'm assuming you could wear as like a, just regular over the arm, but I love the way that she wears it in the photos. That's exactly how I plan to style it. And I have a few different types of yarn that I think could make their way into this pattern. So the two that I was torn between were my Barocco Chunky that I thrifted not too long ago. This is the Alpaca Chunky Tonal. It is originally a $15 skein of yarn, and I picked it up at the thrift store for $3. So I thought that this would make a really nice neutral. I don't have a brown purse, and I thought I could pair it with the leftover that I had from my Thanksgiving vest of the Drops Kid Silk in this colorway chocolate. As when I mentioned this in my winter knitting plans, I had a few people say that the alpaca wouldn't hold its shape, and so they advised me to do so. So I was actually really happy when I had this left over because I thought the two of these together would be perfect. This was an option for the main body of the bag, as well as this fuchsia pink, also thrifted, boucle mohair that I picked up for, I want to say, was this one $3? I never remember, but this was such a steal. And I had about 250 grams of this all together. So I thought that this would make for a really fun little pop in a knit bag. And then I also have this chenille black yarn that I picked up a while ago from Hobby Lobby. It was on clearance, and I got this for $1.12, and it is the Yarn Bee Forever Plush in the colorway black. It's just a chenille, but I thought that that would work out nicely for the strap. And the only issue was that I didn't love the way that the pink looked with the black. And I couldn't tell if it was just the undertone of this black is very blue to me. And when these were put together, it was just reminding me of being like, when I was a kid, I was in twirling and how our twirling troupe wore these fuchsia pink and black and rhinestone costumes. And that's what this reminded me of. I think it's the chenille. I don't know. The whole thing was bothering me. And then looking at this pairing, I really liked this, but it was boring. And I've been staring at the black and white musselburgh, and I've been staring at the charcoal gray dad's sweater. So inevitably, I went with the fuchsia boucle. So without knowing what to pair it with, I turned to my stash and I remembered that I had another black yarn. This was also thrifted, but this is the Barocco Luxe. First in fashion, it's 57% cotton, 30% rayon, and 13% nylon. And the reason this made the difference was because it, first of all, is a true black. It didn't have, obviously, the fuzzy chenille quality, which with the boucle just wasn't working for me. And so I decided that this would be the way to go. But furthermore, I felt like with the boucle bag, it really needed some hardware. So I ultimately decided that I would not be knitting the double knit purse strap, and rather I would purchase a strap for this so that I have a hardness, a different material, something to counteract the sort of girly and frilliness of the fuchsia pink fuzzy mohair. So I went ahead with that idea, and let me show you the progress I've made since I cast this on last night. Ta-da! This, first of all, is more challenging than I thought it was going to be, but I'm not mad about it. You are intended to knit this at a very dense gauge. So in the pattern, she just kind of says, like, use a yarn that's going to be really like tight and snug. And so I am holding my boucle double, and you work these, she calls them tucks. They're little channels that eventually a zip tie is going to go through so that the bag holds its structure, which I just think is very cool, very different from anything I've done before. I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly didn't anticipate that it would be knit up this way. But essentially, it's knit in two halves plus the strap. I'm not doing the strap. So at the moment, I have one half of the little purse done. And just this morning, now I'm all tangled up because I was showing you the yarn. Just this morning, I cast on the next little half of it. So this is being worked up on 4mm needles. If I had to guess, I just finished this morning and I started it last night. I can't imagine that I have put much more than maybe 5 hours into it. So great little project for just a palette cleanser, which is what I really felt like I needed. I'm enjoying the way that the Barocco Luxe is working up in these little tucks. It's giving enough difference in texture that the chenille wasn't going to give me, as it sort of has a roughness to it, which is great too, because that was in my stash and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with it. So that's been really fun. This is also going to need a zipper. I haven't double checked yet, but maybe I could use one of the zippers that I had purchased with my dad's zipper. But at the moment, this is hanging out on some try-it-on tubing while I work up the second half, and then everything just gets attached together. You hand sew the zipper, you hand sew the zipper. And then I am going to get some little D-rings that I can add to the mouth of the purse. And I'm thinking a like gunmetal chain for the hardware for the strap, maybe a leather. I don't know, something just a little edgier. But I think that this will just be really fun to have. I don't expect it to be my new everyday purse. I just wanted to have a little fun. And while in my 2024 knitting plans, I stated that one of my goals for the year was to not knit the same pattern twice, I feel that this is very different in that there really isn't anything else like this. Although, you know what? If you know of another purse pattern that's sort of a similar vibe to this, definitely let me know, because what knitting this has shown me is that I definitely want it in the brown. So if you know of another like cute little on-the-go crossbody bag that I could knit out of that brown chunky alpaca, definitely let me know. Otherwise, I probably will knit a second one of these as just another palette cleanser. And what I want to say too is, if you are someone who feels like you've knit everything and you've done everything and you couldn't possibly learn something new at this point, try this pattern. It's a fun little construction. And if I have to give one piece of advice, a few times I stopped and stared at the pattern and thought, that's certainly not what she's asking me to do, is it? Maybe I'm reading this wrong. How many times have you heard people say this? The piece of advice is just follow the pattern. Do what it says. Yes, that is what it means. Not many people have knit this up on Ravelry. There aren't a ton of project pages for it, but I'm going to be very happy to add mine to the project pages because it is bringing me a joy that I need right now. It is a little bit tough on the hands because you are meant to knit this at a super tight gauge. And I do feel like about halfway through, you could see that I was slacking a little bit in my tension, but it's a bag. Like, who cares? It's all good. So I'm very happy with this so far. I know it doesn't really look like much, but hopefully next time we chat, it's done. So all of that being said, I'm feeling a little scattered. I'm feeling a little bit like everything is just going to be in the same place at the same time. And that's what I've been trying to avoid all of this time, is to sort of have one project that's really just, making its progress, and then another that's taking its time so that I don't have to worry about all of these things being done at the same time. But that's okay. I'm embracing the fact that once all of these are done, it's going to be a fresh slate. So that's exciting for me. So yes, technically we've got whips as the boulevard bag. We've got the corsabin cardigan. Dad's sweater needs its zipper done. Musselburgh needs to be blocked. And I have an idea of what the next garment will be, but you're going to have to stay tuned to find out what that is. Those are kind of my plans just built in. If I go on any longer, we'll be here all day, so I will spare you that. What I will let you know is that if you didn't get a chance to catch it, I put up a new video this week that I am so proud of. I put together a styling video on how I style my knitwear, featuring my All Good dress, my Mincho sweater, and my Lika pullover. If you're looking to play a little dress up and, try out some new ways of styling your knitwear, then I definitely recommend checking out that video. And otherwise, if you enjoyed this podcast today, I would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you like this style of video and knitting content in general, then please consider coming to hang out with us more often. I do post weekly podcasts at 9:30 a.m. on Saturday mornings Eastern Time. And I try to sprinkle in a second video somewhere along the week as well. So if you like that, then definitely please consider subscribing. You can ring the bell so that you're notified when those midweek videos go up so that you don't miss one. And other than that, big ol' thanks for watching. I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.